So the fragmentation is for intensity, but it's also to create a place for the reader. And for me, it feels like an incredible privilege to have, 200, 300, 400 pages in the company of a reader. I don't take that for granted. I consider it an absolute privilege. And so I want to keep the reader close to me. That's my whole feeling behind what I do. And together we can go into places that are difficult.
I just had a question about fugitive pieces, because I was introduced to it first through the film, which I adored, and then that led me to the book, which was just a pearl of a poem. But I'm curious about the title, because fugitive pieces seem to me to have no connection. Could you tell me why you chose that title?
Well, the pieces, there's a tremendous amount of music in the book, yes. But it's also the fact that the undesirables in the Third Reich were referred to as Stücke, pieces. And that's part of the significance of that title.
I kept looking like this. Is something Mozart, Beethoven, and I kept trying to find the musical source. But that's
Yeah, two things, both things.
Hello. I also thought that the fugitive was like, Jacob is a fugitive at the beginning, right? And,
absolutely.
And fugitive also means fleeting. So if you look at all these images as kind of fleeting images, they're kind of fugitive pieces. And there's also all the pieces that lay buried underneath the ground. I also thought it was referring to that as well. I don't know. But,
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess my question is that when you have all these pieces, right, you have these images, how do you decide how to combine them? Like, how do you structure those images? I mean, especially if you're going like back and forth between different time periods, how do you make the decision of where to put which image where?
It's extremely difficult, I have to say. It's the image I have in my mind is you have a room full of things and you have a very tiny suitcase. And you know that everything is going to fit in that tiny suitcase, but only in a certain way. If you don't pack it properly, it's not going to close. The lid is not going to close. And so it's a great amount of work, of listening to the unfolding of the story, and the books are full of echoes and resonances, and there's a great underground tributaries, and the scenes come up, and I think very much those juxtapositions have to create, a sum greater than the parts.
The village being submerged underwater also figures prominently at the beginning of Fugitive Pieces. What's compelling about that image for you? Another question I have is, what did you discover or learn in the writing of Fugitive Pieces? What cluster of questions prompted you or motivated you or inspired you to write, and what did you discover about them in the writing?
Well, I seem to be wanting to test faith to its limits. I mean, faith in the most general sense of the word. I think we don't need any proof of violence or horror. We are completely convinced of it. We know no persuasion necessary. But I think that we do need proof again and again of the strength, the power, the consequences of love, of kindness, of certain acts of charity. And these things I think we need proof of again and again to be reminded that they are as strong. the there's a in this book there's several pages where a character, a very very bitter character, is just ranting in a very bitter way. His take on the questions that the book poses are a very very dark one. Is a very dark one. But following that rant, a few pages later, there's a conversation between two other characters, and she says, one character says only a very few words about her relationship with her husband and with this man Lucian in the book, and she says simply, "We teach each other how to live," and all that section of ranting somehow is equaled or maybe surpassed by only those very few words. So this question of faith, what does faith look like after the worst thing? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What is it? And that was a very much a driving force behind Fugitive Pieces. And in this book too, in a similar way, how do we live with certain kinds of loss that seems to completely take apart the world? How do we do that? What is that? And each character is trying to get at that in a certain way, and some characters succeed better than others, but each finds their way in their own particular way. So that's very much a driving force in both these books.
Despite its creaking wooden floors that interrupt readings, you mentioned that the Strand is a grand bookstore. Are there others that stick in your mind?
The Elliott Bay bookstore in Seattle. Does anyone know that bookstore? It's a wonderful bookstore. I love the little local bookstores that have community around them. That community is irreplaceable. People who know what you've read, who know what you might want to read, who have you in mind when a book comes in, and also those bookstores where there are shelves that probably no one has looked at in 20 years, and there's something there waiting for somebody. I think this bookstore might be in that category.